welcome to And Then There Were Humans. Joining me today is Rob Lawless. Rob, awesome to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing well, Chris. It is good to see you again.
Excellent. So, for those of you who don't know Rob, I advise you to go onto his Instagram and check out Rob 10K Friends. That's correct?
Yeah, ROBS10K friends.
Perfect. And you have a really interesting story because we've obviously spoken before, and I've done an interview with you as well. But you are on a mission to meet 10,000 people. That's correct.
Yes, that is correct.
So my first question, I guess, is what made you decide to do this? Because you originally began your career.
hmm
Uh, you graduated from Penn State University with a
hmm
degree in finance.
Yes.
And you worked for probably one of the most prestigious financial firms, Deloitte's.
Yes.
And then at some point, you woke up one day and thought, no, I want to make a change here. So, what prompted you to do that?
Yeah, I think very early on into my time at Deloitte, I knew that it was not the right fit for me.
Okay.
And I had studied finance at Penn State, and the other thing is I minored in entrepreneurship. So that was always a deep interest of mine as well. And if I think about my college or university experience, in the States, we say the same thing, college, university. But if I think about that time, it was probably the value for me was probably like 40% academic, 60% social. So I had my degree and I did well in class and I paid attention and everything. But I also joined a lot of organizations. Like I raised money for the fight against pediatric cancer. I built houses with Habitat for Humanity for people in need. I was in a fraternity. I was a tour guide for prospective students, and I helped organize our homecoming efforts. So, and every year, like I would add one of these things onto my plate. So, I just built a really great network of organic friends, and I was very social too. So every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I'd be out at parties, hanging out with these people, creating memories with them. So I had such a good time at Penn State. I found a lot of people who were like me, had similar values to me there, and then as happens with life, you get kicked out of school to go be in the real world, not kicked out but graduated. And I found myself at Deloitte, which was my dream job at the time. Like with my finance degree, I thought I'd either go into investment banking or consulting, because to me those were the two most prestigious things you could do. And I did that with Deloitte, and yeah, very early on, just found it wasn't for me. I think the things that I didn't like about it was the lack of control over my own schedule, like that I didn't eat lunch until my manager ate lunch, or I didn't leave the office until my manager left the office. And if my manager said I had to work over the weekend, it didn't matter what plans I had, I was working over the weekend. And that was just not a sustainable lifestyle for me, despite whatever they were paying me. And I think having that interest in entrepreneurship too, I was like, what am I doing here if there are people my age in San Francisco who are working on their own ideas? And of course, it's the really successful ones, but they're getting paid millions of dollars in funding to work on these dreams that they have. And I guess I had this naivety or this confidence that I was as capable as they were in creating my dream. And because I missed that sense of community, that coupled with the fact that back in 2015 or 2014 even, you could create a concept on the social media platform, get attention, and then find funding through partnerships and stuff. I was like, I'm going to meet 10,000 people because I think that's very interesting. I know that is something, like I've always been the nice guy, very easily met people. I know it's something that I would enjoy and it'd be good for me and the people around me. So that was kind of the spark behind it.
I mean, you're very naturally personable, so it's really. I mean, it's super easy to talk to you, and I think that's probably what makes it really easy for a lot of people who you do connect with to do that. But the actual process from sort of waking up one day and saying, "Hmm, I'm going to meet 10,000 people." Did your friends and family kind of look and think, "Is Rob okay here?"
They certainly did. My I'm the youngest of three, so my brother's 2 grades above me, my sister's 6 grades above me, and my brother was kind of from the very start supportive of the project. Uh,
Okay.
there was a time, and I started the project November of 2015, so I had left Deloitte, went to a tech startup in Philly, moved into the city for that job, and I figured, okay, this is my new campus. I can get to know people here like I did when I was at Penn State. So I started the project in that time, which was like a year and a half after I'd come up with the idea. But I started it, and yeah, I was at this startup, and 8 months after I started the project, that startup was bought out. I was laid off, and I decided to jump into this full time. And my brother, yeah, supportive at the time. Like he thought it was risky, but uh, knew that I was driven and ambitious with it. So he supported me. My sister and my parents, on the other hand, treated it with worry. Like I think in their mind, they were like, our son screwed up by leaving Deloitte Consulting to go to this risky tech startup that obviously didn't work. It didn't work like we knew it wasn't going to. And now he's lost and he's been laid off and he doesn't want to work and he's lazy and whatever. I think like that was probably what was going through their mind, because it's hard to, I've noticed from my position, it's hard to really explain your vision to someone where a lot of the process, that vision is discovering the answers along the way. But I knew my commitment to it. So I knew that I wasn't going to do it for like 3 months and then screw myself from getting a new job and leave it. But yeah, they were worried and they have been worried ever since. My sister has come around. My parents have come around too, but there were certainly a lot of times where they encouraged me to stop the project, to go back to the safety of a corporate job. And I understand that from them wanting the best for me. But I've always been like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to see this thing through to the end, and I'm going to turn this into my career.
I mean, you're at the stage now where you are just over halfway through the 10. So you've just cleared 5,000, correct?
Yes.
And who was the first person you interviewed?
The first person, he was a guy, he ran a website called billypenn.com, and he was the owner. So Billy Penn, William Penn, is the founder of Pennsylvania. So
Okay.
here in Philadelphia, on top of our city hall, is a statue of William Penn. So he's a big figure in there, and it was like a Philadelphia millennial-based kind of news source. And they had this who's next list, and it was like who's next in the culinary scene, or who's next in the political scene, or the music scene. And the owner, his name was Jim Brady, and I reached out to him just to say, hey, I am gonna message people from these lists because I'm doing this project. They were having a Who's Next bash, which was an event to bring all these people together. And I just told him like, hey, I'm gonna go to the event to try to meet people, and also if you want to be part of the project, let me know. And he said yes. So we met for lunch in downtown here, and that was November 11th of 2015. He thought that I was already 1,000 to 2,000 people into the journey. So I'm not sure if he would have said yes had he not thought that. But we had a great conversation. He used to work for the Washington Post, kind of talked about his journalism career and how he drove across the country with his dog. And it was cool. I've always been laid back, and I'm sure you know that from our meeting together. Like it's not, I always say it's not an interview. It's just us chatting and chilling like old friends that haven't met yet. And I think I had that from the beginning, and I think having such a positive experience with it encouraged me to continue doing it.
I mean, you're super calm. I think that's the one thing that came across when we first met. I mean, we'd never even spoken. It was simply an exchange of emails of saying, "Yeah, I'd like to be part. What do we do next?" And I remember sort of coming on, and to be fair, my interview was quite funny because I was sat in my kitchen um, whilst there was major building work going on behind me, and you were super calm, whereas I was sort of sat there going, "I'm really sorry about the noise and everything else." Um, in terms of the interviews that you have been a part of thus far, what are some of the interviews that have touched you the most in terms of the emotional element to them?
There's a girl that has stuck out to me, and it's been kind of difficult to think about recently, but I met her in April of 2020. She was in Serbia, and that's where we had our like we called to each other virtually. Um, and she told me about how in July of 2016 she was the victim of a mass shooting, and she was shot 6 or 7 times and went into an 8-day coma. They had to amputate her leg during that time. So she came out of this experience not having her leg. She had nerve damage in her arms and hands. She was working towards a computer science degree, but she was able to come back from that and like take back control of her life. And I found that to be really inspiring, especially in a time where so many people were struggling with like, hey, you have to stay indoors, hey, you have to wear a mask. And I'm seeing like these people are freaking out about that. And then I'm seeing this girl who got shot 7 times, had her leg amputated, and was making the most of her life. And I don't think I will ever forget her. And I talk about her a lot in speeches that I do. And, here in the States, we just had 2 mass shootings, which is ridiculous.
No, I know.
Um, but yeah, to think about like, because it's always for most of us, it's something that you hear about on the news or something that's outside of your circle. Like it still affects you emotionally. But this was the first time that I had come in contact with someone who was a victim of that circumstance, who lived that. And I think for me, a lot of the times in my project, I find it fascinating to be like, this was someone's life path. Like my path is I went to Catholic school up until college. I got my degree. I went to Deloitte. Sure, it was hard. I worked long hours, but this girl's path was coming in contact with this traumatic experience that had a major impact on her life. And she's not the only one. So that is certainly a story that sticks out to me. And it, because I didn't know that until I talked to her. I had no idea because I didn't look at her Instagram before. And when we got on the call, she told me that it had been the first time she'd shared her story in a while. And I was like, oh, well, why were
Wow.
you sharing your story? And then you learn, and then I go and see the pictures of her Instagram where she has a prosthetic leg and stuff. So yeah, I don't think I'll ever forget her.
How do you come away from, well, not just that interview, but with, I guess with any interview where it's very emotionally demanding stuff sometimes. I mean, I'm sure not all of them are as emotionally, like, demanding as those, but when you come away from an interview after speaking to somebody and someone's shared their personal journey with you, what how do you sort of defragment after something like that?
I think one of the things that helps me is the fact that I write about these people and then share their stories. Because I think maybe like a doctor, for example, there's like they have the story or the people that they treat, and then you can't really talk about that stuff. Or human resources or like a therapist, for example, probably hears a lot of really sad things, but they are not able to share that with anyone. For me, it's like people tell me their story and I put it out to this audience on Instagram. So I think it's really helpful for me that the information goes into my mind, but then it also goes back out of my mind to be shared with the world. And I don't always share like the deep parts of people's stories. There's a lot of stuff that stays between me and the people I meet. Um, but I think just having that option to do so. And then the other thing, I'm an empathetic person, but I think not necessarily like an empath who takes on other people's energy and feels weighed down by it. I think I'm just able to compartmentalize it in that way. And I understand that people who are telling me these sad things, they don't want me to solve their stories or they don't want me to really do anything about it. They're just really happy to have a listening ear who's providing them space to get stuff off their chest.
Yeah.
And I can do that. And I think I've gotten better at that over the years to like sit with people. Um, and then one of the things I've noticed, and I spoke with someone today who cried. The first person I met today cried during our meeting, telling me something about his life, and you can see like the blood vessels in people's eyes get red, and they start to well up with tears, and you can see them talk through it, and then you can see their eyes start to go back to white, and they reel it back in, and it's just a very like interesting human experience.
Well, it's interesting because we spoke about something that I hadn't intended speaking about. And when I come away from the interview, I found it really fascinating because I remember speaking to my other half afterwards. He said, how did the interview go? And I remember saying, I spoke about authenticity, and I don't know why, because it wasn't something that I had gone into the interview thinking, I'm going to speak about this. But strangely, we spoke on authenticity and on what that meant to me and how I arrived at that place. And in essence, everything that you have done has been from a very authentic place. Has it always been as smooth sailing, put it that way, to sort of do interviews? Because you do quite a few interviews each day, don't you?
I try to meet 3 people every day.
Okay. And what's the process? So you'll spend an hour with them. I mean, you don't normally publish the full hour interview. You'll publish sort of snippets from each part, correct?
Right, yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess for context, I used to meet every single person in person. I met 3,259 people in person. And if COVID never happened, I never would have done a video call because I was kind of a purist in my approach that I want to meet people from other countries, but I want to have that motivation to get to Africa, to get to Asia, to get to South America. And I figured I would do all of that in person once I had like a partnership with American Airlines or British Airways or Marriott, whatever, because those things were all things that were possible before COVID
Yeah.
decimated those industries. So yeah, and then I went to virtual, and with Zoom, it's a bit easier to record and not have it be so intrusive on the conversation because it's just a red button.
Yeah.
And I always like, yeah, authenticity is big for me too, both in myself and the people I chat with. And there's like this layer of they trust me with their story to not talk about certain things if they say it, or in person to not write about those things. But I just started recording them because I was like, it's nice to have a 60-second clip to add more of their personality to thing. And I find that people in my audience enjoy watching those videos, and the sound of someone's voice or their body language or the story they tell gives you a more enriching experience of who that person is. So I've done that with video calls, but now that I'm doing in person again, every in-person meeting I have it's all from memory, what I write.
It's exceptional. I mean, are there any awkward moments?
Sometimes, but I think I am such a, as you know, like such a laid back person that if it's awkward, I don't
Super
really
laid
care.
back.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason that works is because a big thing for me is to treat human connection as an experience rather than a transaction. So then if it goes off in this weird direction, it's okay because it's not going against any plan that I had, because I
Yeah.
didn't have a plan. My only plan was to spend time with this person, like an hour with them, and learn from them. So yeah, I mean, I've had like interesting moments. I remember being at Temple University, a school nearby, when I first started the project, and I was chatting with a girl, and she was like a student. I was graduated at this point, and this um, guy came up to us from the streets, and he was like, "Oh, you guys look like you should get married together," and started like putting this pressure on us. I was like, "We just met. I don't know who. I'm not even a student here." So things like that will happen. Sometimes third parties interject themselves into our meetings. There have been times where like you run out of things to talk about, but that was part of the reason why I wanted to do an hour with each person, because I thought if you run out of things in that hour and there's that awkwardness, it forces you to explore what else you can talk about. And then you dive a level deeper. And I kind of liked that. And then I got so, I think, equipped at talking with people that I rarely have those instances anymore.
I guess you have a natural interview technique because it doesn't come across as an interview. It just comes across, like you said earlier, as a conversation that you would have with anyone. But if you're doing an interview outside, I mean, do you do interviews outside?
Outside in,
As in, like in the park or
oh, yeah, yeah.
street, etc. I mean, do you find that it's? I mean, sitting here, obviously, I'm sitting with a bunch of lights, etc. You can't really do that outside, but is it very easy to kind of make that look sort of seamless and like you are just having a general conversation with somebody, or is it quite obvious from people viewing you that it's like it's an interview that's taking place?
Oh, no. Like, when I say, like, it's not, I don't see it as an interview. I like, no part of it to me is an interview.
Yeah,
So people call it interviews because it makes sense in their mind to see it in
yeah,
that way. But if you ask me, I haven't interviewed any of the 5,000 people I've met, because it's just, to me, we're just having a conversation, and I anticipate them getting to know me as well as I'm getting to know them. And sometimes the way people, it makes sense that people think it's an interview because there's a post on Instagram and there's me writing the story. So I've had, which is why I wrote an article that was like, PSA, I'm not interviewing people. And I try to send it to everyone beforehand to kind of
yeah.
set the expectation, because otherwise people do come in and they sit back and they're like, all right, grill me with your questions.
Yeah, ask me.
And I'm like, I don't have questions. And you know, from our experience, like we just chatted and the
We did.
conversation flowed where it flowed. And um, yeah, so I have instances where people come in, they speak for 60 minutes, I can't get a word in edgewise, and then I'm like, all right, well, it's time to go. I have to run. I have people who give me one word answers
Yeah,
and they wait for the next question. and I'll be like, "Oh, sorry, I'm dominating the conversation. Do you have any questions of me?" And they're like, "Nope." I'm like, "Oh, okay. I will ask more then." And then I have people where it's just very much a volley back and forth. So a lot of it is just conversations, and uh, I think a lot of like sometimes because in person we always find a stranger to take our picture together. And I've been
Okay.
at a lot of cafes and stuff, and sometimes the people nearby be like, "Oh, can you take a picture for us? I'm doing this project." And they're like, "Oh, we thought you guys were like best friends, like that you had known each other for years and we're just hanging out." And like that's kind of like by design.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So, how do you? What would you say that you've actually learnt about yourself in this process so far?
I think from hearing other people's stories, a lot of gratitude, kind
Okay.
of like what I was saying about the girl who went through, who was the victim of the mass shooting.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful that my life has taken the path that it has. Even the fact that I can do this project, like if I was someone who had experienced the trauma as a child from people, I might be much less motivated to go out and expose myself to strangers and have conversations with them. But I had a very consistent, stable upbringing, and I think a lot of people who go through that can just think it's the norm and like that's what it's supposed to be like for everyone. But
Yeah.
when you start to talk to people who grew up in homes where they had to move every 2 years for their dad's job or for their mom's job, or someone was in the military, or they had issues. I talked to a girl who grew up bouncing from foster home because her parents dealt with mental illness. Like her experience was much different than mine. So the fact that I have two parents who are still together, still love each other, I have two older siblings that were great examples for me. What that used to be a norm in my mind is now a luxury. Like I have much more appreciation for that. And the fact that I was able to go to college and not think about, like I met people who had to drop out of college not because they were dumb or because they were lazy, but because their parents couldn't take care of themselves on their own. So they had to go home to get a job to help their parents pay rent for an apartment. Like I've never had to take care of my parents and play parent to them, but that's not the case for everyone. So it's that times 5,000 is like that gratitude that I have for the path that I've been on. And then I think another thing, just from like a personal standpoint, is I learned that I'm very disciplined and I'm very consistent. And if I say I'm going to do something, that I'm going to do it. And I think that I've learned to be maybe my own biggest cheerleader, because I mean, having my brother is really nice. My friends hosted me in Los Angeles for a year and a half. Incredible friend. I had a friend who hosted me in Hoboken, New Jersey for 9 months. I wouldn't be here today without them. But day in and day out, it's like I'm the one who experiences the confidence and I'm the one who experiences the doubt. And sometimes if there's like my parents, for example, when they were like, "What are you doing moving back into the house without a job, without a girlfriend? Like, what?" Uh, I really had to just advocate for myself in those times. And I think having a vision and going from like people questioning it in the beginning to now people from around the world reaching out to me to be part of it, I was like, I was right. And now the next step is I can do this and I can make enough money to survive doing this.
Did,
That's
did you did you ever think that you would get the amount of press that you got? I mean, I was watching an interview with you the other day actually, and it was with Kelly Clarkson, and I was like, "Wow!" I mean, you really seem to have touched a lot of people's lives with this because people sort of identified and recognized that sort of connection with humans. And I think like these days, and you know this as well, that the average sort of attention span of most people on social media used to be about 7 seconds. Now it's something like 4 seconds,
mm,
where people just flick by because they just want the next fix and the next fix and so on and so on. And although people sort of collect friends on sort of Facebook and Instagram and other social media platforms, they don't actually connect with them, whereas you are genuinely connecting with people. So
yeah, I think I did think I was going to get that press, and I think there will be more, and I think because I think it's just such a unique concept, and now I think that I'm halfway through. I have a better understanding of how much it really required to get to this point. So in a way, I feel like I've earned that kind of press, and I feel like one of the things I noticed, like when TikTok became a thing, and I shared a video about what I was doing, and like people from South America were like, "This is so cool," and people from Africa and people from Asia, and I was like, when people are exposed to my story, a lot of the times they're really like drawn to it
Yeah.
because it is so counter to what we see in modern society. And sometimes, having been on Kelly Clarkson's show and done Ryan Seacrest, the Today Show, whatever, I can get into this mental space where I'm like, anyone who was ever going to care about my project already knows about it and already cares.
Yeah.
So this is as big as it's going to get. So I can get into that place. But then when you have a new audience that sees it and they take to it, they're like, oh, wait, there's so many people that have no idea that I exist. Like I exist in a very tiny little corner of the internet in my own little world over here. But yeah, I hope that more people hear about it going forward. And I think I've always like been very laid back with my approach to press too. Like Kelly Clarkson came to me, Ryan Seacrest came to me, and I always wanted the concept of what I was doing to speak for itself. But there is also a thing where it's like this idea of being open to the people around us and wanting to intentionally connect with them. It does lead to the creation of empathy, and I think that's really valuable for the world. So I think at a certain point, it's up to me to go spread this impact and make sure that it is reaching further than just me having this personal experience.
Has empathy ever has it ever been a challenge? Because I mean, you're naturally an empathetic person, but has it ever become overwhelming?
I don't think it's become overwhelming. I think that like I'm able to hear different people's viewpoints. Sometimes people who are different viewpoints than me. I've never had like a combative situation with the project, and I think that's because people know like I'm going in to hear their story, and I'm bringing respect to the table, and so they do the same thing. And I think even people who like I don't know. I think people with different viewpoints, even if they know I have different viewpoints from them, they're cool with it because they're like, well, this guy's meeting everyone. Like, how can you have to be open to different viewpoints if you're going to take on a mission like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's certainly expanded my perspective, and I've learned a lot about people that I didn't know much about when you come face to face with them. And I think like my personal viewpoints become then a derivative of all these things I'm learning through the project, combined with my experiences that I had growing up as a kid.
How now that you're just over halfway through, so with the interviews, whenever you get to the 10,000 mark, what's next? What comes from that?
It's hard to say because I was just having this conversation today. Like, there's so much that I don't know about that I'll be exposed to in the next 6.5 years. That maybe one of those things really grabs my interest and it just takes me and I go there. But the plan right now is to, I've already started speaking. I started speaking like a year ago, and that's how I currently make money for the project. Speak at universities and corporations and conferences. But the plan is to get really good at it. Like, there's like Tony Robbins is a fantastic speaker, and there's like Gary Vaynerchuk or Jay Shetty, all these people who are so polished. And I want to get to that point where when I get on a stage, I know I'm going to crush it. I know the audience is going to walk away feeling really impacted. And I want to start doing that now. So by the time I finish the project, I am the guy that's met 10,000 people and can share his insights on human connection, on the human experience. And I plan to do that until the day I die because I think I'll always have that knowledge. But the other thing is, I would like to be a professor at a university and teach a course for first year students where the students pair off one on one each class period and learn from each other's backgrounds as opposed to a textbook or a PowerPoint slide.
Have you always been this focused? Because I have to admit, I've met a lot of people. You've probably met a lot more people than myself, but you come across as incredibly focused and incredibly determined. It's almost like you just woke up and went, "I can do this," and just went and
Hmm.
did it. Have you always had that in you?
I feel like I've been calibrating it throughout my life. Like I've learned to trust myself along the way. And I
Yeah.
think in, well, like high school, I did well academically. I worked part time. I had my first job when I was 14 years old. I was a cashier at Chick-fil-A. So So I've always been like willing to do work to progress in life. And then I got into college, and I was just like I said, I was out every Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Like I did not miss party night. But I also would be in the library all Saturday, all Sunday, and I learned to trust myself. And I feel like with exams, when I would on tests, like I knew every question that I was going to get right because I just knew the answers if I knew them. And then I would mark the ones that I was unsure of. And I would go back through the test and re-look at those ones. And for some of them, if it was multiple choice, I'd be like, my gut is telling me C. And I don't know necessarily why, but maybe something in my subconscious knows that I studied something and that's the way it should be. So I would go with that. And oftentimes I would be right on those answers. So I was like, oh, maybe I can trust my gut and trust myself. The other thing was something as simple as going to the gym. I decided I was going to go to the gym 3 days a week when I was like a junior, senior in college, and I just didn't miss it. Like I was like, okay, I said I'm going to go to the gym, so I'm going to do it. And then the summer going into my fourth year, my last year, I was living in Pittsburgh for an internship, and I was going to the gym, and I wanted to eat healthier. I wanted to stop eating like Doritos and stuff. So I was like, I'm going to trade junk food for like avocados and carrots and spinach and stuff. And I just kind of switched it in my mind because I was more attracted to like the result that I knew I was going to get from what I was doing than like the temptation of the other stuff. And because I kind of was like doing that at like every stage in life, I think it just compounded. And then jumping into this project and then doing it every day and being excited, and then waking up and being like, wow, I have met 5,000 people, and I haven't been getting paid to do it. There's no one telling me to do this. I'm like, oh, maybe I can do, like, maybe I am determined enough. And I think getting to 5,000 too, I think has been a really big confidence boost, because getting to 5,000 without really having any way to make money from the project, to me, is like, that's the hard part. Now I know I can make money by selling my story on stage, by delivering talks. So I feel like the second 5,000 should be easier than the first 5,000.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. Have there been any challenging or low moments for you on this journey so far?
Oh, 100%. I think like every week, yeah. I mean, right now I am on a sublet through, so I'm renting an apartment from a guy who had to leave his lease. So it's a 9-month sublet. So I'm here in Philly through the end of September.
Okay.
And like I said, I'm starting to do speaking. So every day I'm like calling schools and trying to apply to conferences and stuff. And um, there's a chance that a lot of them will land, and I'll be in a really good position to either move to New York City, get another apartment in Philly or whatever. There's also a chance that none of them land, and that I'm stuck like potentially moving back to my parents again in October. And the thing is, like, there's just time is the only thing that's going to help me figure that out. The only thing I can control is like how many schools I call or how many conferences I apply to. So I can try to control it, but a lot of it is just time, and like I'm just going to figure it out when I get to that point. And I sit with that a lot. And I will go through a lot of doubt with that. Like, you have a call with a school that you thought was going to turn into something, and they're like, oh, well, we don't really see the value. And you're like, yeah, I guess no one will see the value. I guess it was dumb of me to ever think that I could speak about this. And you can get into those places in your mind. And I'd often go through the cycles of confidence and doubt. But I think the one thing that I stick to is the action of meeting people. It's always been like, regardless of whether I'm feeling good or bad, if I'm meeting 3 people a day, I'm going to get to wherever I need to go. And yeah, that's kind of the way I anchor it. But yes, and I think as I got through the project, we were talking before we started recording, like, was it hard to take it full time, or has it? And I said it's kind of gotten harder the longer I've done it full time, because when I first took it full time, I was 25, and I was in the same stage of life as a lot of my friends. And then I saw really what sacrifices this entailed. It entailed not getting married when everyone else got married. It entailed not being able to afford a house when all my friends bought houses, not having kids when all of them are having their kids around the same time. So it kind of put me in this other little quadrant on my own. And I think sometimes that has been difficult, but not really, because I wouldn't want to be in that one yet, but I still think about it. It's like an odd thing to be. You become like on this island of your own. And I don't have a lot of other people who are meeting 10,000 people to chat with and be like, oh yeah, how's it going for you? Uh, so that can be hard, but yeah. But then you land like a gig or something, and you're like, oh, of course, I'm good. Why did I ever doubt myself?
But your level of perseverance that underpins all of this is something that seems almost, you can't break. It's just something that was innate within you. Would that be fair to say?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So how? I mean, how do you do that? Because I mean, I think everyone that will be listening to this interview at some point, regardless of their goal, whether it's meeting 10,000 people, or whether it's getting a job, or whether it's learning at university, etc., will have gone through different sort of highs and lows, and some of those, of course, can be very traumatic in life. But you seem to have sort of almost just brushed your shoulders and just gone, okay, well, I can do what I can do, and this is what's within my power. And then, of course, these things are outside of my control, and I just have to trust the process. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I've gotten very good at controlling the controllables.
Okay, and not worrying about the uncontrollable.
Yeah, because there's nothing I can do, right? Like I will, if I find myself feeling really anxious, I'll meditate and I'll become more intentional about it. Like I try to meditate, like that's what I put on before I go to bed. There's an app called Insight Timer that
Okay,
has like thousands of free meditations.
okay,
So, and you can search by whatever, like manifestation or sleep or like whatever, confidence. And I'll listen to those to put myself to sleep every night. But if I'm feeling really anxious, then actually I'll incorporate like 10, 15 minutes
okay,
into the day to bring myself back to center. And I think part of the perseverance is just because I think the path that I'm on will work. Like I think that I can create a career out of meeting people, and I think this can be my legacy, and I think it's the best thing for me and the people around me. Like I feel like I'm more me personally is more valuable to the world as Rob who's met 10,000 people than Rob who is trying to work his way up the ladder of Deloitte. That might not be the case for everyone, right? Like some people
yeah, true,
working their way up the ladder at Deloitte is incredible for them because they're using that to then go off and do really great things. For me, I was the employee who was like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm not motivated in this place. So when I was able to step out of that, I was really able to thrive. It's kind of
yeah,
like say like don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
yeah,
Like I'm finally
correct,
in the water.
yeah. Have you always been able to visualize where you want to be?
I think that's been difficult. I hear a lot about that too of successful people, like visualizing your success or
Yeah,
visualizing where you like Kobe Bryant, for example, apparently was really big on that and imagining yourself like hitting the game-winning shot. Or for me, it'd be imagining myself delivering a speech and getting that standing ovation. That's
yeah,
something that I've had to work on, and so I'll do guided meditations for visualization because it helps me if someone's like, here's what you should visualize. And I'm trying to, like, one of the things that I haven't done yet, but I want to start doing is I almost want to write like a story about me who is succeeding as a speaker and having a really big impact and just like write down what it would look like. Because I think the more it's in my mind, the more I can kind of calibrate my mind to make it a reality in real life. So yeah, but that's like yeah, I try to do that stuff, and I've been through a lot of mental gymnastics over the years of like they're like manifest your situations. Like, okay, well I've been doing that for 4 years and I'm still here or whatever.
okay.
Um, so yeah, I think manifestation is a really interesting thing. Your visualization is something I want to put more time into going forward.
As you go through the interviews, how open are you? I mean, for me, it was really easy for me to talk about my story with you. It was like meeting up with an old friend for a coffee, where we were just chatting, and I loved it. It meant a lot to me because it was just a super authentic moment where I came away from the sort of meeting with you and just thought, oh, it's so cool, and it was just really lovely. So for you, I mean, I know obviously people share, some of the good times and obviously some of the most terrible times in their lives that they've been
Mhm.
through. For you, how open in that scenario can you be?
I try to be like as open with them as anyone would be with me, because I just
Do you
think,
feel vulnerable?
do I feel maybe. I mean, it doesn't feel like a pressure to like, oh, like
No.
I'm sharing this big thing with someone. Um, it just feels, because a lot of times, I don't know, like the talking about being doubtful in myself, or like being 30 years old and having to move back into my parents' place, which in the States is not like as widely as accepted as it is in like Latin American culture, for example.
Yeah.
Um, I think I try to be open with people like that, because I think it is helpful for them to know the reality of the situation. Because a lot of people could look like, I think social media is so much like, I could be someone on social media who's like, oh, I'm killing it. Like, I'm meeting all these people, I'm doing all these speeches, like these brand deals are coming in. Like, let me go rent a Lambo and show people, like, oh, I'm thriving in this lifestyle.
Yeah.
But then those people are like, I'll never be able to attain that.
Yeah.
But if I can talk to them and be like, I'm doing this project, I've doubted myself many times along the way, but I've stuck to the action, I've had to go back, had like $500 to my name, struggled to do anything other than buy coffee and gas, then people are like, okay, well, I feel that struggle as well, and I feel like I'm trying to grow in my life. So if he can come from that struggle and still be disciplined and motivated and taking that action, then maybe I can too.
Well, I never got from you that you were trying to be somebody that you weren't. I
Hmm.
What I got from you is you were being completely within yourself, with completely, as we spoke about, completely authentic, completely in the moment. And the one thing that surprised me was, I guess, the older I've become, possibly the more guarded I've become in terms of giving too much emotionally, particularly to somebody that I've never met before. But I remember as I was talking to you, it probably wasn't clear visually, but I remember thinking I felt quite choked up as I was talking to you. And I thought that was interesting because I normally only allow people that are close to me to allow myself to do that. So, do you ever get to that stage where, if people are telling a story, or in fact, if you're telling your own story, that you feel choked up? Or,
So, sometimes I don't like, I feel like I'm fortunate enough with my story that there's not a lot of things that get me choked up, I guess. Like if I retell the story of some people, it's hard for me to do that sometimes, because I will get choked. Like uh, examples are a mother that I met who had twins that were born prematurely, and she was able to hold them for 24 hours before they passed away. Like, that struck me. If I think about it too much, like, I will start to get choked up. I met a girl who, her brother was hit and killed by a drunk driver the year before we met. I sat and she and I cried together outside of a cafe in Los Angeles, crying. She was crying because she had lost her brother. I was crying because I could still call my sister after that meeting, and it meant so much more to me. Um, yeah, so it happens.
but I think for me, this is somewhat the important part of it, because I think anyone can speak to somebody. Anyone can go online or go to a coffee shop and have a conversation. But I think when you get to that level of, or that moment where you are genuinely connecting with someone, which is something that you do. It's not fake. It's completely real in what you do. I think you can't get past that. You can't not feel it on that level.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think it's nice to have that support with someone. Like, it's almost like the perfect stranger. Like, you can talk to them, and it's different than talking to someone in your inner circle, where if you're vulnerable with them, for example, like, you're gonna see them next time, or they're gonna whatever. And I think one of the things that I guess I employ with my project is a willingness to discuss whatever. Like, you and I could have talked about football for an hour, and I would have been
I
just
probably
as
couldn't have talked about football.
yeah, I or whatever, like, it could have said kept it very surface level, and I would have been just as happy to meet you
Yeah.
as if you had taken me into a deeper part of your life. And I think because I'm not trying to be like, I'm not trying to get the sensational headline or to
No.
get the storyline to entertain an audience. I think that's a reason why people feel okay with opening up to me.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, obviously, after the interview that you did with me, you sat and wrote the blurb, as it were,
Mhm.
for it, and I was really touched by it because it came across as just very a genuine snippet of the conversation that we had, and it meant a huge deal to me because I've spoken to so many people since our interview and said, "Oh, I met this guy called Rob, and he's in Philadelphia, and he does this," and everyone was like, "Wow." And everyone that I've spoken to went, "Can we speak to him?" And what I think was even greater is the fact that this started, of course, in the States, then has now gone pretty much worldwide. Um, is there any countries that you haven't spoken in so far?
Yeah, so I think I've hit 85 countries, maybe closer to 90 now. So there's still like 100 or some so out there that I have not hit, but it's been cool. I I'm getting much better at geography, and
Were you
and I
not before, or
no, I think there's like this being an American. I think there's this stereotype that is true, and it was true of me before, where we really only know what's going on in the States. Like we're so overwhelmed with our own news here, whether it's elections or Hollywood or whatever, that we tend to forget what is going on in other countries. And I found that really cool when I started to talk to people from other countries and be like, what is the issue that's going on in your country right now? Like, what are people talking to or about outside of COVID? And I would ask people, like, who's a celebrity in your country? And like, I talked to a girl from Sweden yesterday, and she told me these two dudes who I can't pronounce their names. But I look them up on Spotify, and they both have like 90 million plays of their songs, and it's wild to me. Or there's a Colombian artist. His name is Maluma, who you may be familiar with, but I was not.
Maluva?
He's like a reggaeton artist. But again, I was like, I have no idea who this dude is. And then you go look at Instagram, and he's got millions of followers. Turns
Yeah.
out he's like world famous. But I started to get clued in more to what was going on in the world when I started talking to people from the world, which makes sense. But yeah, like Mauritius, for example, a girl reached out to me from Mauritius and was like, "Yeah, I'm from Mauritius. I'd love to meet." Never heard of it before. I could not tell you where it is, but it's an island country east of Madagascar.
Yeah.
So now I know that. Or Suriname, which is in South America. Never would have known that. And now I've met like 5 people from there.
Well, you're now pretty much international, so I think it's fair to say it's going to continue from here. Um,
Hmm.
if you could meet one person from either your past, your history, or somebody that you would really genuinely, even if they're still alive today, that you would love to sit down and have a conversation with, who for you would be that person?
I think currently there's an artist that I really enjoy. He's not like famous. Well, I guess he could be famous, but his name is John Bellion, and he's the same age as me, but he's just I really like his music. It's very poppy. It's if you remember the song Trumpets by Jason Derulo like
Yeah.
10 years ago, he produced that song. So
Okay.
that style, it's like very like poppy and stuff is how his songs are. But he does these YouTube videos of the making of his songs, so you get to see the creative process in his mind. And I feel like he's just a musical genius, and I think I'm just very curious to learn more about what is going on in his head. And I'm also just a huge fan of his music. So I think that's current. And then I don't know if like past, first thing that came to my mind was JFK, because I've always just been fascinated by like the stories of his ability to connect with people and how personable he was, like the charm that he had. Uh, so I got halfway through his biography, and then they were talking about too much like policies and stuff and politics, and I couldn't. I still have to finish it. It's on my list, but I've always just been interested by him as well.
Where do you get the time?
to read and stuff.
To do anything. I mean, you are doing tons. I mean, you're doing absolutely loads from the sounds of it. I mean, you're doing public speaking. You're talking to people. You're over halfway through the 5K, as it were. Um, I mean, it's quite amazing that you've got time for yourself. How do you sort of relax? I mean, I know you said you go to the gym and stuff, but
Hmm.
how do you sort of calm?
Yeah, the gym is a big thing for me. I try to go 3 days a week
Yeah,
still, and then it's also an opportunity to listen to music for me, and that's a calming thing. Uh, Living on my own now, like this is the first time I've ever lived on my own, so it's a new experience, and I like it. I find I spend a lot of my downtime watching Philadelphia sports. So the Sixers were on for a while. They lost in the playoffs. That was heartbreaking. But now the Phillies are on, and the Phillies will be on throughout the summer, and they typically play at like 6:45 every night. So I'll finish my meetings, I'll cook dinner or whatever, and then I can just throw them on in the background, and it's something that I care about, but I don't have to pay full attention to like a TV episode.
yeah.
And then I will, like on weekends and stuff, it's a lot of time with friends and family. It's a big priority for me. And I try to read an hour before bed every night. So I'm in bed at like 10 p.m. every night. I'll read till 11, 11 lights out, throw on my little meditation, and then I fall asleep.
That's pretty epic. Rob, listen, Rob, it just remains for me to say a massive thank you for you coming to talk to me today. It's just been amazing, as the first conversation that we had was as well. If people want to, can they donate to what you're doing? Is that possible?
Yeah, I have a Patreon page where people can subscribe. It's in the link in my bio on my Instagram.
Okay, so
Uh,
what we'll do is we'll put that link on my website as well. So if people want to give towards it, then they can do as well. But listen, Rob, thank you so much for today. It's been absolutely awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I think the same way that you felt with me in that comfort and being vulnerable, I have felt that way with you running the show this time. So I
Awesome.
appreciate you giving me that space, and it was wonderful to chat with you again.
Yay! So you're very welcome, by the way, to come to London.